doctor, a scientist, and so he wanted to put together a gospel that had some stuff that no one else had, and quite possibly, Paul and some of those folks that talked to other folks just kind of were able to take those stories and offer them up. So here again is one of those stories that you'll find nowhere else in the gospel. So my question for you this morning is, how important are your words? When we get our family together, we have a couple of 2-year-olds somewhere drifting in between. So we hear the parents say a lot, use your words. Right? Maybe you might ask the question this way, how important are other people's words to you? Is that sometimes maybe our words get to slide, but when someone else tells us something, whoa, that's gospel. You see, we start holding on to that again. Words are important. True words are invaluable. False words are worthless. However, there's a footnote here, and that is words are not enough. Words are limited. You hear me say this a lot. You can't talk yourself out of what you've behaved yourself into, right? So there's something else that's going on. You're telling the world something else with your life that sometimes works with your words, sometimes it doesn't. So here's a little exercise. Think of your most favorite teacher in school. You might think of your worst teacher in school. I had a lot of those. I had 1 or 2 that got me, and that's probably why I'm even here today. But most of them didn't, or I didn't get them, or whatever that was. And the supreme difference between a really good teacher and a really bad teacher is that a bad teacher can get away with teaching you the test and giving you the words to say, and you never learn anything. A good teacher turns words into understanding. Oh, now I know how. For my dyslexic mind, I went, oh, wow. I felt like Dorothy hopping out of the house in Oz, and everything went into Technicolor. It's amazing that someone would take the time to turn words into understanding. And so here we have Jesus, wonderfully, again, with a little bit of side context. But here we have Jesus, wonderfully, again, telling a story instead of telling you to get it right. You might try this at home. You might try this with a spouse or a really good friend. Instead of telling them what you need to tell them, sit them down and say, I'd like to tell you a story. And work on that story for the afternoon. And then, as you're telling the story, they get the point. Okay? Sometimes if we just tell people with words, it's like a sharp pencil in the eye. It's not going to work, but telling the story. So look at verse 9 with me really quick. I want to read it. It says, and this is Luke's introduction to the story. Because it's obviously not Jesus. This is the narrator of the gospel. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everybody else, Jesus told this parable. Luke obviously understood where this was going. Now, here's the deal. He says the word there, confident, which is the last thing that they were, right? Check it out. It's a qualified confidence. You see, if you're really confident, you don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to lobby someone to your point of view. If you're truly confident, you're there, you're comfortable, you're in it. But when our confidence is qualified by either known or unknown insecurity, then we're constantly trying to convince others, convert others. We need their approval. We need them to believe what we believe, because the truth is we lack confidence and we're not sure it's true. So if we can get an army of people around us that link arms with us with our idea, we can go, I'm okay. Jesus is wanting to give us an okayness. an approval that comes from truth, not from mustering up my best argument. And so we have this story. It's wonderful. There's two prayers in the story. The first prayer is the prayer of false words, which compare and justify the prayer of the person praying. Okay? So check this out. The first prayer is someone using false words to compare with someone and to justify the self. So already this prayer has a point that has probably little or nothing to do with God. And this is done by excusing oneself and judging others. By excusing ourselves and judging others, we can find just a little bit of an edge that we can stand on and say, I'm good. I'm good. Okay? What's going on? The Pharisee has a short-sighted spirituality. Now, we weren't going to like this character from the beginning of the story. But now I'm going to tell you why. I'm also going to tell you why this is going to hurt a little bit, because this is kind of us. We know this behavior well because we know our own hearts. Okay? His spirituality is lopsided. He sees himself as an exceptional, superior person. But he has no self-knowledge of what his words and his actions do to people around him. In order to get here, he has to judge others and compare himself to them. So you're talking about your basic motor mouth, blowhard, know-it-all. You're also talking about this, and this is in relation to us and anyone else that we see that acts like this. They are the emperor without clothes on. The emperor's new clothes. A story. Can you imagine that? Where did Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen get their stories? I wonder. You see, because when these people walk through our lives, we rarely tell them that they're that way. Partly because we don't want to be told ourselves. It's a little bit on the ugly side, isn't it? We don't want to be told that, man, you are really, dude, you're looking like an idiot. Because that would, back at us, right? Here's the summary. Standing at the temple, center of attention, all eyes. He's looking at all the people so he can get comparison as to what's going on. He prays about himself before God. He's elevated himself above all the people around him. And if you go through this prayer again and again, just circle all the I words. He's talking about himself. I love Charlie's prayer. Just thankful. All about God. In how many days he had left of summer. Not like he's counting or anything. Let me offer some considerations for us as we get this. Consideration number one. This isn't in your notes. Just think about these things and put them there. Beware of anything. Be skeptical of anything that makes you the superior person in your thoughts, your prayer, your talk, or your deeds. Okay? Anything that makes... This is what's so fun about gossip. Oh, Jeff, you're taking all the fun out of it because we're better than the people we're talking about. We've solved their problems. Anything that makes you the superior person. Whoa! Think about that. Just give yourself a big whoa. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Whoa. Yeah, that's what you got to do. Take ourselves too seriously. Number 2. Every wrong thing that I see in another, God will locate in me. So you can throw that boomerang, and just when you think it's in, you're looking this way, on the back of the head. Because God's going to make sure that this appropriate wisdom that you have for everyone else is going to come back to you. You see, life gives back. Number 3, life gives back in the coin that you pay. Number 4, this is kind of a recap. Our ability to see hypocrisy, fraud, and unreality in others is because we've seen it in ourselves a lot. So we get the language. We know how to do that on the computer because we're doing it in here. And finally, comparison spirituality is always bankrupt. Don't tell me how you're better than someone or something else, or your spouse, or your kids, or your teacher, your dad, your mom. It ain't working. You're just twisting that. Comparison spirituality is always bankrupt. The great Basil the Great in 329 AD said this: never place yourself above anyone, not even the greatest sinner you know. You just don't have it. And you don't know what they really have before God. So the second prayer is the prayer of true words. Words that examine and discern. But the tax collector stood at a distance and would not even look up into heaven. He beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I love that. Short prayers. You know, how many times can you say that, right? You see, the true prayer, words that examine and discern, happen by seeking mercy and humbling self. The tax collector prays a most sophisticated theological prayer. In fact, the theology of this prayer isn't really cemented into the consciousness of Christianity for another 1,000 years. He prays, oh God, let everything that I deserve pass over me. Judgment, difficulty, curse, consequences. He already understands justification by God, which is through the gift of grace, based upon faith, where he sees things not as he feels them, he sees them as they are in God. He is justified by the things of God and by the hope that God brings to his life. And so he prays that. Listen to his summary. He's standing far off, focused, wouldn't even raise his eyes to heaven, prayed for mercy for himself from God, humbled himself before God, seeing his sin, repeatedly struck his breast. I love that in the video. Boom, boom. You know, he felt it deep. Here's the big shock. Imagine our own outrage, disbelief, and confusion. And it can happen at any time. When it is revealed that a perpetual, long-term, evil reputationed sinner comes to Christ at the end of his life, while at the same time, someone who appears very spiritual is exposed for being a fraud, and we say, oh, how can that be? My team loses, and the bad guys. This is the point of Jesus' story. It is so easy to pick your sides, folks, and to go with that. God's saying, I've got the menu. I'm ordering from you. Leave me a clean plate. We want to have this dance with God that we're going to figure out all these things that we deserve to have, and that's the world the way it is, and it's right, and we may just be practicing how to become superior people, especially over the ones we don't like. And where did that come in? That's been the point of each of these stories. Who is it that you don't like? Get a hold of that. Start loving them. That's all we got. They're not going to turn around. Most of them aren't them, and we're us. How did it turn out that the world was supposed to reach out to the church and make it easy for us to accept them? Where did that happen? These guys are all ticked off in these last 3 stories because Jesus is with them. Because Jesus knows the themness in us. When are we going to knock it off? When are we going to find our place? The last verse forms the application for us this morning. And this is the principle of humility and exaltation. Okay? It goes like this. I tell you that this man, the tax gatherer, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who is humbled will be exalted. It's probably true that Peter and Paul talked about a lot of these stories, and so one day while they were all having, coffee down in the souk someplace in one of those great old cities, Luke was asking these guys some questions, and Peter says, "Hey, here's a story you missed. No one's written about this story. You ought to put in the one about the tax gatherer and the Pharisee. They go into a temple. And this is how it happens." So Peter, in 1 Peter 5, chapter 5, verse 5 says, "God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore," verse 6, "humble yourselves under God's mighty hand, and He will lift you up in due time. Cast your anxiety on Him, because He cares for you." What's the use of all this work if we don't see that God cares for us and is trying to take us someplace? So just by bringing this around one more time, pride equals self-sufficiency. When we're in pride, we look down on others. Easy for me to do up here, right? Think about that. And we compare others to justify ourselves. Those who look down will be humbled because they're holding tight onto what they have. Humility, on the other hand, is needy and teachable. In humility, we look up to God, contrite, personally confessing our sin, with a desire for God's grace. Those in humility will be exalted because they're letting go and they're letting God. You see, if you try to hold it all on to yourself and make it all work, that's how everything, to use Carol's terms, that's how it comes all unglued in the first place. This is the beautiful thing about the gospel. The glue of the gospel is not this, till veins pop out in your head. The glue of the gospel is this. Oh God, man, I need this. I need to know this. I need to understand this. Let's pray together. Oh Lord, as you examine our hearts this morning, as you have told us stories, you have encouraged us to know and see and hear the things that we need to know and see and hear this morning. The great contrast of our lives, not as we behold ourselves, but as we are beheld in your service, in your way, in your life.